Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about John McTiernan's film Die Hard with a Vengeance, the third film in the Die Hard trilogy, the original Die Hard trilogy, before they added Live Free or Die Hard and A Good Day to Die Hard. I said this in my video about Die Hard 2, Die Harder. The original trilogy, for me, it moves the way that the Indiana Jones trilogy does, which is that the first film is excellent, the third film is excellent, the second film really dips in quality. So Die Hard with a Vengeance, I think, is a spectacular Die Hard movie. Not in the least because it has a return to the Gruber family. Whereas in the original, in Die Hard, you had Hans Gruber, played amazingly well by Alan Rickman. In Die Hard with a Vengeance, you have his brother Simon Gruber, played, again, amazingly well by Jeremy Irons. You also have the introduction of Zeus Carver, who I believe is only in this film. I don't think he's in, if I recall correctly, he's not in Live Free or Die Hard, and I haven't seen A Good Day to Die Hard. I have no real intention of seeing it. But Zeus Carver played very, very well by Samuel L. Jackson. And of course, Bruce Willis reprises his role as John McClane. So this is the only one of the original trilogy that takes place in John McClane's own environment, which is kind of an interesting element of this. The original film, so John McClane is a New York cop, as he establishes from the very beginning, almost, of the original Die Hard movie. Die Hard takes place in Los Angeles at the Nakatomi Tower building. Die Hard 2 takes place in Washington, D.C. at Washington Dulles Airport. And by that point, he seems to have become an L.A. cop, following his wife Holly out to Los Angeles. Although how she would have kept her job at Nakatomi Trading after the events of the first movie, that seems really questionable. That just occurred to me, that her career was the building where her good career was occurring was basically destroyed by her husband, alongside some terrorists or thieves who planned to destroy it anyway. Anyway, that's not that important. So in the second film, it seems that he's an LA cop, but he's gone to DC. But in this film, he's back to being a New York cop, and the events of this movie take place in New York. And yet, McClane does not seem more comfortable or competent, or, I mean, not that he's incompetent, but he doesn't seem more comfortable. He doesn't really seem to get along with the police in this film, which is a recurring theme in Die Hard. That John McClane is kind of a maverick who just, he does what he does, etc., etc. And of course, we kind of established that in this film because the chief is basically like, yeah, John McClane sucks. You don't really want to bother with him. He's such a loser. He's terrible. Because what happens is that Simon Gruber, they don't know that he's Simon Gruber at that point. He goes by the name Simon. He wants to play Simon Says games that will get John McClane killed. Zeus Carver intervenes in the first of these games, where John McClane has to go into Harlem, apparently just in his underwear, with a sign that says, "I hate N-words." And the intention is that he will be murdered there. Zeus intervenes, and they end up sort of fleeing back to police headquarters. And then because Zeus is insulting on the phone to Simon, Simon ropes him into these games as well. So Zeus and McClane become partners. They have to go around New York City solving various puzzles. This involves them doing things like stealing taxis and driving through Central Park at top speed, etc., etc., all this sort of crazy stuff. Because Simon has planted bombs in various areas, and he will set them off if they don't comply with what he's saying. Ultimately, he claims that he has planted a large bomb in a school in New York, and so they have to they basically have to comply with what he's saying, or he will blow up the school. While that is going on, we find out that, in fact, Simon's goal is not just to blow stuff up or just to kill John McClane. It is, in fact, a robbery of the Federal Reserve Bank, I think. Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which has tons and tons and tons of gold from different countries in it. Because of the combination of the explosions and their very good planning, etc., etc., Simon and his accomplices are able to break into this bank, and they get all of the gold, except for one bar, which Zeus Carver picks up and then ends up abandoning in the back of a car that they steal. So they're making their escape. One of Simon's associates sort of realizes that somewhere along the way, the gold has been switched out from the containers to some other location. What he is not privy to is that the plan is actually to blow up the boat that everybody thinks this gold is on, and therefore people will stop looking for it. The authorities will stop looking for it because they assume it's at the bottom of the river. But that is not what happens. In almost a repetition of the original Die Hard, Simon's plan is basically to blow something up as a distraction for having actually stolen the money, which is pretty much what Hans Gruber had done in the first film. The plan there had been to tell the police and FBI that they were going to the roof with the hostages, then blow the building up, or at least blow up the roof, killing all of the hostages, but allowing the criminals to escape. McClane works this out because he claims, or he says to Zeus, that he knows the man and he knows the family. So he assumes that Simon Gruber is going to come up with exactly the same type of plan that Hans Gruber had come up with. And he makes a good point that the only thing better than stealing a massive amount of money, or then blowing up a massive amount of money, is convincing everybody that you blew up a massive amount of money. So, McClane uses his knowledge of Hans Gruber's tactics and assumes that Simon Gruber will use the same ones. Whether or not that's a good assumption, I mean, it does turn out to be, but whether or not in reality, in real police work, that would be a good assumption, would be, of course, a very different question. Ultimately, there's a whole sort of series of bits where Zeus and McClane try and infiltrate this boat, and then they realize it's going to get blown up, and they manage to escape. They track Simon Gruber to a place just on the other side of the Canadian border, Though it's not really clear why U.S. law enforcement is able to go to that place. Because if it's in Canada, which it does seem to be, U.S. law enforcement wouldn't have jurisdiction there. So there's that. But, it's a generally sort of high octane, exciting film in the tradition of the Die Hard films, right? Of trying to sort of outwit someone who has meticulously planned, who is very well funded, who has a very clear, organized plan. And John McClane basically has grit, determination, and a handgun. And he manages to successfully defeat the bad guys. Again, it's a fun movie. Partially because of the inclusion of Samuel L. Jackson, there is much more humor in this one than there is in the second. But also, you have Jeremy Irons, who's such a good actor that as a villain, he's very compelling in a way that, and this is probably, I think, one of the reasons why Die Hard 2 is so much weaker of a film. You just don't really have a charismatic, compelling villain. So, I don't know if it is the Grubers as such, but it's certainly at the very least, the two actors who play the Gruber brothers play a major role in the success of these films, in my view.